Zak is the CEO and founder of ApexDrop, an influencer agency that doesn't pay its influencers. A renowned author, speaker, influencer, and entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience, I'm excited to pick your brain on the lies that we've been told about influencer marketing today. Zak, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to get into these lies.
Yeah, so kind of just kicking it off, what are some of the fallacies of influencer marketing?
Well, the big one is that you have to make money while working with influencers right away, or that means it's not working. Yeah, so like I get this all the time as an influencer agency. Brands want to make money, obviously. That's why you're in business. But making money isn't really the only way to measure success from an influencer campaign.
Mhm.
It's really about making money in the long term. So most of the time, brands think that they have to make money immediately in order for it to be working. But the reality is that if you're making money in the long game, it's probably working much better than the short game version. So if you think of it like this, if you're in sales, you need money right now. Like you're worried about today, you're worried about making money today. If you're in marketing, your job is actually increase sales over time. And that's generally by increasing opportunities. It's also by optimizing the funnel. So like getting it to be optimal means improving the conversion rates, filling it with really good quality content and traffic. But ultimately, your job as a marketer is to improve conversion rates, improve and extrapolate results, and think bigger than just in the today. So yeah, that's probably the biggest lie, is that there's no other way to measure it besides money today.
Yeah, yeah. So, are there some examples that you have that, successful influencer marketing campaigns that didn't necessarily generate the revenue of high sales, like you said, which is kind of the fallacy, but they still achieved other goals like increasing brand visibility or creating buzz around a product launch?
So yeah, some examples. If you're trying to make a quick buck, first off, just maybe you're not right for marketing, but the posts, if you think of the posts as the beginning of the campaign rather than the end of the campaign, that means that once your products are being shown on social media, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, there's actually so much more that's going to happen afterwards that you can measure. So the first thing you want to measure is like, do you have a relationship? Is this a customer? And is this something you can build on? So the content itself is valuable, the post itself is valuable, but the relationship is nearly priceless. So like if I asked you like, how much is a good friendship worth? Most people would say a lot, or priceless. It's hard to put a dollar value on, what is somebody, a good friendship or a good relationship worth. So instead of thinking of it as just the immediate sales that you get, think of it this way: how can we make this relationship pay off long term? So one thing you can do is, you can work with the content itself to increase your sales on your website. So some of my clients, especially way back when I started, they were very scared about investing in product sampling and sending products to microinfluencers because they couldn't see the instant sales bump that they were hoping for. So I learned in the early days that, you have to have a way to measure sales success or you're going to be in trouble. So the brands that did this, they would specifically, there was this one woman who was running a leather bag manufacturing company. They were making these beautiful bags. They were moving away from like doing photography satchels to like more of style and clean looking, fashionable bags. The owner called me freaking out in the first couple of months saying, Zak, this is expensive, to invest in these influencers. These bags cost a lot of money. And I said, you're gonna have to trust me here. This is like getting the word out. You got to start with some kind of customer base. And I'm glad she did. And she was glad that she stuck it out, because after about 6 months, she said, Zak, she's like, you were right. She's like, the website, everything is starting to come through. I'm now seeing the impact. It just took a lot more time than I thought. And so she became one of our biggest advocates, and she became a reference for the company. And it was really cool to see someone who saw the value, but then like got a little freaked out and then came back around and said, okay, I get it now. So yeah, the posts are just the beginning. And if you do it right, if you work with an influencer and you turn them into a customer before you turn them into an influencer, they will keep producing for you. They become advocates. And an advocate is another one of those like very hard to put a dollar value on. So yeah, generally you want to you want to take a zoomed out approach to measuring your influencer efforts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Kind of speaking to that, your friend that you worked with and the businesses, how can businesses ensure that they're not putting too much emphasis on sales volume, but, are instead measuring success in other ways, like, brand awareness or engagement?
So business is about sales. You have to measure sales volume. I don't think that we can get away from that. However, something I discovered that was an aha moment for me was to measure year over year or quarter over quarter sales increases or decreases. And this changes the game for a marketer. So it allows you to zoom out. It allows you to talk to the leadership team at your company in a way that they'll understand, because they're thinking quarter over quarter, they're thinking year over year. And if you're a marketer who's talking about day over day differences, you're small minded and you're not going to be part of the leadership discussions. So this is a cool way to kind of get in good with the leadership and also to kind of get the respect that you deserve as a marketer. Mm-hmm. So I call this one thing you'll want to study is called multi-touch attribution. Multi-touch attribution is about measuring the different effectiveness of different techniques at all touch points in a funnel. So your marketing funnel is, from the very top, it's, awareness, just kind of seeing what's going on, all the way through intent down to the actual purchase itself. And then the new marketing funnel actually includes now customers, so there's a bunch of points. I'm not going to get into each of them, but the idea is that you measure the outcomes based on the total funnel and not just the outcome of the drip, the sales. So there's many different ways to look at that. One thing I noticed is, like, when people say, how much money can I make doing this? It's like, well, how much money can you make getting a really good photo on your website? Mm-hmm. Or how much money can you make from a really good billboard? And the answer is you don't know till you do it. So some of this is about measuring all outputs. So, if you can take all sales and say, I influence all sales, you're gonna be in a better position with your leadership team, because then now you'll get the respect you deserve and you're not just a salesperson with one source. Mm-hmm. But it also helps you take a better approach to marketing, because now you're not trying to cannibalize your own sources. Mm-hmm. So, like, back in the day, I remember I'm showing my age a little bit, but I used to be the internet manager for companies. That back in the day there was actually people called internet managers, and that meant that you managed leads from the internet for businesses usually. Well, I found that a really easy way to get more leads was to take the phone number off the website. so like the phone just stopped ringing and everybody had to submit a contact us form. And guess who got all the credit?
There we go.
Mr. Internet got all the credit. Well, the boss was so impressed, right? And I remember thinking, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But at the same time, it got me a raise. So, like, don't steal from yourself. I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're being honest about the business, you're not trying to cannibalize the traffic. You want to actually be the person who cares about all traffic, including phone calls, including internet leads, we used to call them internet leads. But, the funnel really does come down to what's the overall sales happening for this company. Mm-hmm. Now, for big enterprise companies, I get it that you have to measure a store's output or, a specific source, but don't overthink your sourcing. One of the biggest mistakes marketers make is that they think that you can source everything. And I know it's not you. I know it's your boss. I know that your boss is like, which one's working, what advertising's working, and they're being obsessed. But you have to, as a marketer, convince your team that this is what marketing is. And if you don't, you will be stuffed into a little sales box, and you'll be the salesperson who just happens to do Google AdWords, So quit. I guess my big lesson, is quit trying to be a salesperson for your company and start being the marketer you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Ask your team about their revenue goals. Ask your team about the budget. Ask the team about what they're trying to accomplish year over year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years, and start talking like the leader that you are. Mm-hmm. Because if you're helping the company invest, now you're actually being a marketer. Mm-hmm. So, how much money is your team investing in marketing? Mm-hmm. You should know that answer as a marketer. And if you don't, you're not a marketer. So here's something I ask every marketer. I'm like, so what kind of spend are you guys doing in digital versus traditional? What are you doing right now overall in marketing? And I'd say 1 out of 100 has the answer. And it's kind of sad, because it's like, marketers, you guys, this is why you're not in the cool kids club. Like, you're being left out. The Google guy, the guy that gets all the ROI, the guy that's measuring every result and sources it perfectly, that guy's worshipped at the company, and he's got an easier job, to be honest. And it's kind of sad. It should be flipped. So the reason you're not getting the credit you deserve is because you're not measuring the outputs appropriately. And think of Costco. Like if you were, I know you're not going to do samples at Costco, but like imagine you were giving your products at Costco and you're doing a sampling. You have a table sitting out, and if you were giving away samples for 15 minutes and then just packed up and said, so like, how did we do? Like, well, you just gave out some samples. What do you mean, how did we do? Like that. People look at influencer marketing, they treat it like this 15-minute sampling system. Like, oh, they posted and the post is going to disappear. It's only on there for one day. It's like, well, you're kind of right that it's at the top for a day, but the reality is that content's going to live forever. And, don't be prematurely pulling the plug on things that you haven't given a chance to actually do what it's supposed to do.
And kind of going off of that point, you mentioned kind of the unique skills and expertise that, these professional influencers and agencies and marketers bring to the table. You were talking about some of the great things that they're doing. Expand on that a little bit more and how businesses can, help them create high quality campaigns with these skills and expertise.
It starts with defining what high quality is. So, do you know what your team thinks is high quality? What do you think is high quality? Most people have something different in mind. So I know what your boss is looking for. Your boss is looking for sales. Quality is sales. You might be thinking that you're looking for cool looking people doing cool things and it looks real pretty or neat. A real marketer, a smart marketer is looking at engagement rates. So they know that that's the link juice. That means that it's actually working, getting traffic. So your definition needs to change, and your definition of your boss needs to change. If you're going to make this work, you first have to play politics. And I hate to say that, but you got to play politics. If you're not convincing your team of what works and what doesn't work and why they work and how it works, you're just going to get yelled at and you're probably going to get fired, because they're going to go, yeah, we didn't see any money. It just dropped $10,000 on this program. And, Zach doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So you got to know how to play the game, and also to get the team to see where your project should be measured against. And you absolutely shouldn't be measuring this against your Google ad spend. That's foolish. So, if you're putting your Google ad spend against your influencer efforts and you're like apples to apples, you're destroying your influencer efforts, because your high quality is not the same as your boss's high quality. You could tell them all day, but look how cool it looks. But your boss can be like, yeah, but we didn't make any money. Like, that's what they care about. So you got to be able to play this game. So, who knows their audience best out of you or the influencers? Who knows the audience best? Is it the influencer spent how many years building up that audience and putting things in front of it? And like, you have to think of, like, if you spent 2 or 3 years building up, let's say 10,000 followers, when someone likes your content or not. You feel the likes, you feel the ups and downs of the thumbs up. You know when it resonates and when it doesn't. So as a brand, it's I don't know, it's like we get so full of ourselves. We think we know what audiences want, but we're hiring artists who know how to speak to their audience. I think something that is really important to get to your team is to help them understand the principles around that. These are people that know their audience and that they're not trying to sell things. They're not salespeople. So to base all of their quality on whether or not they got sales is actually really it's distasteful. It's rude. And I'd have to say it's wrong. It's just wrong. These are people, and they sometimes make amazing content and it's well received, and a brand will say, yeah, like influencer marketing doesn't work. I didn't see enough sales. And it's kind of sad. So yeah, if you're looking for content that's unique, your best bet is to give creative freedom to the influencer. So I call this management by exclusion principle. If you've ever heard of this, this just means that people can be more creative and get better outcomes when you give them what they shouldn't do, the box like that, instead of what they should do. So as a marketer, while you're working with influencers, try not to give too many restrictions that make it seem like, this is exactly what I want.
Mhm.
it's okay to say, here's the things I absolutely don't want. Don't do nudity, is a pretty extreme, but like, maybe it's like, I don't want any vulgar language if you can help it. Maybe you're trying to work with a wholesome influencer. That most influencers will honor not saying the F word, like that's, but telling them what color it needs to be and at what time of the day, and how, oh, you need to say it this way because people need to know it's exactly this thing. Yeah, it kind of sucks. Like I actually had a startup company that makes this amazing product that is waterproof. The stuff just drips off you, and they're new to the market, so they're a little bit they're not as sophisticated with their marketing budget yet, or their team yet, but they're thinking that the influencers need to say the words the right way or it's not effective. So one example was they said they said that the market doesn't understand this product and it's never existed before. And they know all about their product, how it was made. They know the chemicals and everything. And they're like, we need the influencers to say it this way because their people won't understand it. They'll get it wrong. And it's like, well, okay. So I listen to that and I try and help them understand. It's like, yeah, they might not get it. And that's actually good feedback for you. So, when the influencer posts and they say it wrong, that's like your customer saying it wrong. It's the same exact thing. Don't overthink this. Don't say, well, I'm paying the influencer. They should have got it right. How dare they? Instead, just look at it like a learning opportunity and say, if they didn't get it, my audience, my normal customers aren't going to get it either. So treating your influencers like your best customers and understanding that creative control kills uniqueness, kills the actual creativity.
And on the flip side of that, though, how can businesses ensure that they're not limiting themselves to only working with one type of influencer, like a specific demographic or a persona? How can they, like you said, it's important to have creativity, but how can businesses make sure that they're not limiting themselves?
Yeah, to one specific audience, you mean?
Yeah.
Like the idea here is Roy H. Williams. If you've ever read Wizard of Ads, it's one of the most fantastic marketing books. The Wizard of Ads said it's less about who you reach and more about what you say. And that was probably the most important thing I've ever read in a marketing book. Roy likes to make fun of people that are in marketing that think they know best about their audience, because he knows, like, well, now, like I know, it's the message that matters, not the market. So like, if you're not saying it right, the market will never attract to it. So it's important to kind of get, the staged photos. Sometimes like you want to get the beautiful looking shots when you're a young company and you're trying to get some cool looking pictures up. But that's just like hiring a photographer. And it's okay to treat influencers like artists and photographers and videographers because they do that. But don't overthink this. And don't become overconfident about the influencer's audience being so much like them. So what does that mean? I have no hair, right? So like, you might not hire me to do the hair commercial. However, I might have 1 million followers with hair, right? So like, maybe I have somebody in my life who is special to me who has hair, and I want to give that product to like the person I care about, and then have a moment that I could capture for my blog or my vlog. Just because I don't have hair doesn't mean I don't know people with hair that I can't influence a product about hair. So like, don't overthink it. If I want to try your product as an influencer, just because I, don't have hair doesn't mean that I'm not the perfect customer. I might go to the store and buy this product because I have influence in this space somehow. So yeah, the influencer is not their audience. Don't get them mixed up.
So kind of talking about, you being bald, may not necessarily being the right person for the hair, but not, limiting creativity. How can businesses ensure that, they're not limiting themselves by only working with influencers who fit a specific demographic or persona?
That's a good question. So like PR and marketing firms tend to, like, their first project is always like, build your profile of your perfect customer, and they give her a name, like, this is Amanda and she's an at-home mom, but then she's like, she's a go-getter on the weekends, and they try and tell you who your perfect customer is. I think target profiling is utter bullshit. And I really think that this is a way for PR firms to steal your money. Because honest to God, you know your customer better than that PR firm. You do. And like you almost pretend like you don't so that you can pay them to do this for you and give it a name and be like, yeah, this is who we're going to go after. So like, once you've come up with the perfect customer in your head, now you think you can like go after them. Oh, I know where they hang out and I can hit them with my message. Guys, let me just be honest with you. Everybody's online, everybody's on social media. And that was the old way. Like there used to be certain magazines that you had to get into. Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. Sorry. So like the targeting, I mean, I get why people do it, but you're really better off thinking about your message being shared by your customers in a way that they want to say. So like here, another example would be like, if you, let's say you own a wine company or you're coming up in the wine space and you have like this delicious Merlot and you really want to get the word out. In the olden days, it was get in the wine magazines, and like get the wine connoisseur and the taste testers to talk about you and give you a high rating. And it used to be this like rating system. They still exist. I mean, these archaic traditional ways, they still exist, but they're becoming so stupid because like everybody knows it's BS and that you can buy your way to the top of that stupid list. So the way it works now, the way we trust people now is not built from the connoisseur that's giving us the ranking. It's from the regular person who's never ranked anything saying it's amazing that's really affecting us. So the guy on Amazon who leaves a review, or the guy on YouTube who's just happened to be using a product that they like, and they're like, oh, I like this thing. I didn't get paid to talk about it, but I really like this thing. No sponsor. It didn't sponsor me. Like, I like when I hear them say, they didn't sponsor me, I just use this thing. That's actually the product I want to go find out. Some guy's like, oh, I've been using this beard oil for 3 years and I love it. I'm going to go, wow. Like, and he goes, and I didn't get sponsored to say that. This is just the one I like. I probably should have called them and got paid to say that. Like that's a good pitch.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the critic who gets cringy, and it's the ranker who's ridiculous, and it's the regular guy who you trust. So try not to get into that space where the BS meters are going off. If the guy says, if you reach out to an influencer and they say, I'd love to feature your product, and you go, well, of course you do, because you're a connoisseur of what I have. Just know it's BS right out of the gate. They've never tried your product. And if they have been excited about sharing your product or even pretend like, oh, I've tried it before, the chances are you're going to get a real cringy piece and it's going to look terrible. And maybe you'll fool a few people and you'll get a couple sales and you can write it off and be like, it works. But the reality is you'll be better off just having a random schmo. Really. So yeah, that's my take.
So why do you think businesses think that they can create influencer marketing campaigns just as effective as the professional marketers?
So yeah, I mean, they think that they can do it the same way because, well, they don't know there's a different way, first off. So like when you're doing influencer marketing in-house, you typically see it as one thing. You go, I got to reach out to influencers. I got to convince them to try my product, and then I got to pay them to post. And, there's a whole process there, or they're going to hire somebody to do that exact process. So that process works sometimes. It's hit and miss. And sometimes you do get those hits and that gets you so excited and you go, see, this is why influencer marketing works. I knew it worked. But because it's a hit and miss, they tend to get really skeptical and they want to do something better. So they'll be like, oh, let's hire an agency to do this for me, or a professional. And so when they reach out to the professionals, they say, hey, I had some success, and they're proud of those successes. Can you take what worked, that person that, blew up for me, that quick one-hit wonder that I had? Can you do that 100 times? Because I heard you guys do this. And the truth is you can't scale things that don't work and expect them to start working. So we don't do what you do. And my agency does not do anything like what you do. We start our relationship with influencers by confirming that we're on their side to help them grow. So like, I don't have any conflict of interest with the influencer, because when I reach out, I say, I'd like to help you get bigger and more powerful and more views and become famous. My intention isn't, would you talk about a product for me? Like, I don't have a product for them to talk about. So they trust me because I'm helping them. I start with what's in it for them. I help them first. A brand, you don't have this privilege that I have. You reach out to an influencer and there's dollar signs, ding, 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 ding. They know you will pay them and they're going to go right to the transaction, and they're not going to treat this like, an honest opportunity. They're going to treat it like a business transaction, which is exactly what it is. So, the brands that do this, they keep spinning their wheels trying to work with influencers. They think that I'm going to do what they do, but just the really good ones over and over and over. But the absolute reality is it's a numbers game, even for me, to get things that hit. So the best influencers, from what I can tell, and this is from 7 years, thousands of influencers, the best micro influencers are the ones that are reaching out to you, not the ones you're reaching out to. And actually, most marketers would agree with that. They'd say, yeah, the great influencers are the ones that contacted me, said they were a customer, and now they want to promote the product. Okay, that's great. The problem here is now you want that to happen 1,000 times, and it's not happening 1,000 times. So you can't force that luck to happen over and over again. But I have some amazing thing. It's called, I don't have that problem of transactions. I can literally go in and talk to 18,000 influencers at once and say, I know of a really cool guy and a really cool brand who wants to try it. I can do that, and there's no conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. So that's, there aren't other influencer agencies like mine that treat it like product testing, but I know they're coming. And I know that eventually you're going to see dozens of influencer groups that are just as powerful as the biggest celebrities on earth. And I'm hoping ApexDrop, my company, does become one of those ones that you see. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, this is inevitable. The power of the group is coming. And I don't think you should waste your time trying to build a group of 18,000 influencers for yourself, even if you could. It took me 7 years we work 40 people in my company. It's not really worth it. Let the experts do this. You get back to what you do best. And that is understanding your brand story, and helping sharing your customer's story with the world.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it is that makes these influencers, the agencies, the marketers successful? Like, is there you talked about them being professional. So is it skills? Like, in your experience, what kind of expertise that really makes them successful?
Yeah. So the skills that make the agency successful, at least in my case, is that we have that ability to scale. Mm-hmm. So, we have an army of influencers that are on standby, ready to do waves and waves of interest and awareness. So, there's that's probably the biggest thing, is that they're just sitting there ready. And then another thing that a professional can bring you is a very strong vetting system. So like, you might think that the best looking influencer is the best influencer, but you might be right. Sometimes they look good. They're probably going to be pretty good for your brand. Or you might think the bigger the followership, the better the influencer. And that's also true. Sometimes to have more followers does help. But like an agency like mine and some of my buddies' agencies, our vetting is much more simple. It's highly engaged influencers. So you can talk about anything as long as you have a trusted audience. That's my big one, is engagement. And I have this algorithm I created. It's called trust quantification, patent pending. But there's a little bit more to it. There's a little bit more to it than just engagement, but it's primarily engagement. So that's a big deal. And, I have agency friends that do professionals. So like, they only work with influencers that have jobs in the things they're talking about on social media. That's another really important one. Mm-hmm. Or that, there are groups that are just specific interests. So like the mommy blogger network, or like the hockey network, the sport or the thing. So, eventually there's going to be groups of influencers that join those little niche groups. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening. They're starting to form. The other thing that I would say is a unique skill that a professional has is they can help you take a strategic overview and zoom out, look at influencer marketing. It's hard for a marketer to know how to speak to their team about these things. It's hard to know how to switch the mindsets, the old school thinking, and to talk to the old school people that are still thinking about traditional marketing, and to help them see that the internet doesn't mean instant sales every time, that there are ways to do actual top of funnel marketing. There are ways to build brand awareness and that it's important that they know how to measure it and that you know how to measure it, and start those conversations around year over year differences. Talk like a professional who understands multi-touch attribution and understands how to increase conversion rates and knows that an increased conversion rate is more important than a sale. Those talks need to be your prerogative. You have to study that. You have to know how to speak to it. Otherwise, you're just going to be left in the dust, and you will be fired after your amazing campaigns.
It sounds too like, that's very introspective for the company, the brands, the agency to have those conversations. So when they're, talking about their own capabilities, their own limitations when it comes to creating, effective influencer marketing campaigns, at what point in your experience are there signs that where people just need to say like, all right, we need to bring in outside help? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So the difference between a brand that should bring it or keep it in-house and a brand that should put it out is pretty significant. So the big one is, what position are you in your growth cycle? Are you a startup, or are you at a growth level? Are you an enterprise? The startups, I highly recommend not getting into scaling up influencer marketing outside of just your friends and the people that you connect with quickly. I don't think it's worth it. I think you should put your efforts into things that provide instant money. And I hate Google, but Google ads are the way right now, and Facebook ads and TikTok ads. So, get into advertisements that do provide instant traffic. You might want the content from influencers. So I don't want to say don't do it at all, but I would just say try and do as much as you can in-sourced. The other thing that's important is how desperate you are for money. So if your company is on the down, and like you're not hitting your goals, or you're in survival mode, or like startups are typically in survival mode, you probably don't want to outsource influencer marketing because it's an expensive long game investment. And it doesn't always have that instant impact, and you don't want to have to tell your boss that it didn't work. And when he says it, how many sales did we get? And you go, well, it's a long game. And he goes, no, can't play like a long game. You don't want to have that talk. So another thing is it depends on how courageous you are, and also how much you believe in your product to spread word of mouth. So like if your product is really a compelling, provocative, cool thing that's just, as soon as someone tries it, they tell all their friends, you most likely are in a good spot to grow with influencers. So if you're not afraid of getting your product out there as like a sample, you may want to outsource this so you can scale it. If you're afraid of customers talking poorly about you, and your team is afraid of your customers talking poorly about you, you're not a fit for the micro-influencer product sampling game, because you need to get that thing fixed first. Make sure that you're not afraid of your customers, because influencers are your customers. If your cost of goods aren't right, it might not be a fit either to outsource. So cost of goods is how much you spend to make a product. So let's say you have like an accessory, a belt you're making, and the costs of making that belt are $20 to $30 when you include shipping, and it's like a nice leather belt. It's expensive, and you sell these belts for $100. Your product is $100 retail, but let's just be honest, it's not $100 cost of goods. So like you have to factor in the cost of goods. Are you willing to give away the belt in order to spread the awareness? And an easy way to think about this is, imagine you're walking down the streets of, let's say you're in LA, or you're in a place where you're walking around, you've got the belt on, and you've got an extra one in hand, and you just happen to walk by somebody, and they have 10,000, 20,000 followers on Instagram, or you're like, this guy's popular on TikTok. That extra belt in your hand, would you just hand it to them and say, try my belt, and walk away and not have any expectations? If the answer is yes, you'll probably be perfect for outsourcing with a company like mine, because we could just do that 1,000 times. So, it really comes down to how much you've got invested in those products. Do you have the inventory? Can you give away product at scale? I would say at least 400 product gifts a year. 1,000 would be the right spot. About 1,000 a year is where you can have a massive impact and accelerate your growth. So the last thing I would say to, make sure that either you keep it in source or you outsource it, would be how much control you and your team need over the content. Big companies are really afraid of customers blasting them. I mean, there's wild times online. Censorship, I don't know about you, but I hate censorship. So, if your team needs to censor everything and make it perfect, you're probably not a good fit for anything that involves customers being scaled out like this. If you're afraid your influencers and your brand is going to be bashed, and just don't do this. Is that, yeah, you could be bashed. And if you're bashed, so be it, right? That's just life. So the cool thing with product sampling is that these aren't paid influencers. In my network, they're not paid. That means that they're not forced to say hashtag ad. They do reveal that they got the product, but the influencer gets to decide if it's an ad or not you. Yeah. So some influencers won't post. We're the only influencer agency on earth that doesn't require influencers to post. And that's why we also don't pay them, but that's because we're trying to set them up with a good opportunity for the future, not the first post. So just keep in mind, not paying them is not a bad thing. When would you want to do outsourcing? You would want to, if you have over $3 million a year in revenue, I'd say you probably want to outsource to a company like mine. That means that you've established a certain amount of growth and your product is probably refined to the point where it works. If your team is sophisticated enough to understand what multi-touch attribution is, and they're sophisticated enough to understand the difference between paid and earned media and how that affects a marketing funnel, then I would say you're probably safe to outsource it. And you might think, well, my team is so smart. Why would I want to give it to an outsource? It's like, no, let your smart marketers do smarter things than this. Because let fools like me spend all the time in the world making it happen for way cheaper than they could. They might be smart enough to do it. It's not a good investment of time because I got the army and they don't. So let me do it. I can batch the work and make it so cheap, insanely cheap. The average post on social media over the past 7 years, if you take all the data, there was a study that was recently done. Nano influencers are charging about $1,000 a post on average right now. That's nano influencers. Nanos have 1 to 10,000 followers. They're not massive. And then micros are just a little bit higher, about $1,500 a post right now. It was just 3 or 4 years ago, it was $500. And then 3 or 4 years before that, it was $60 or $50. Guys, this is the Wild West. We just went from 0 to 60. It's so fast how fast this thing is going. If your team has a massive amount of product SKUs, yeah, you want to hire a company like mine. So like I call it the content buckets. If you have content buckets that forever need filled, you might as well get a company like mine to just fill them forever. And like, we'll take care of that. You never have to worry about content when you've got an army of influencers that will make content. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. And then if you have a mature marketing budget, that means that you can afford to wait for outcomes. A mature marketing budget means that you think ahead and you go, okay, what are we doing next year? Like you're thinking of 24 and 23, those marketers. If you're able to think out that far, you could probably do something like what I have, which is invest in things that take 6 months to start seeing major impact or 12 months to see major impact, because ultimately you won't be able to do that in-house. So, I mean, you can do short-term things. You might be able to get a quick hit here and there, a couple lucky breaks. You won't be able to have a consistent funnel filler unless you want to spend your whole life just working on that. And then your company will probably fail while you're doing all this. So pay attention to what matters.
So talking about, quality and effectiveness, it sounds like, those were big points that you were just saying, like, is it time to, hire Apex or, work with, keep it internal. How can businesses ensure that they're not just simply reusing influencer generated content without properly evaluating its quality and effectiveness?
The first thing is to take a step back and realize that the most human brand wins. So what does that mean? Well, ads and algorithms, they do have their value and their worth, but ultimately influencers are people. And you're trying to tap into that trust that they've built with their audience. So you want to think of this as like a popular person who just happens to be talking about you, instead of thinking of them as this little celebrity that you got to get a hold of. And it's always good when an influencer talks about you in a positive light, no matter if they're not your perfect customer, because they happen to have an audience that trusts them. And that's really the most important thing. So the truth is, the best content is content that customers engage with. So if you see influencer content and you go, I don't like the way it looks. Stop thinking like that for a second and say, did the audience like the way it looks? Because the audience are your customers, not the influencer. Now, I know the influencer can become your customer, and that's exciting, but the audience is tens of thousands of people, and they're all shapes, size, colors, different people. Those people are who you're actually trying to reach, and they don't have a profile that you can look at unless you're crazy and you go through all their followership. You can study the followership, but you get what I'm saying. So always as a marketer, put your bottom line above your sourcing capability. That means if you aren't making money long-term, then it's not working. Mm-hmm. If you're not seeing growth at your company, then what you're doing is not working. So, but you're looking at a compass, it's moving a little bit in different directions. You're not just, getting an exact number 1-to-1, you put something in and one thing comes out. Mm-hmm. If you try and source everything perfectly, you'll find that you can't, first off, and that if you do, you're going to cannibalize other things. Mm-hmm. You won't be able to prove the other things are working because you keep trying to prove it for that last touch or last click. Mm-hmm. Last click is cool, but it's definitely not the only thing. Mm-hmm. And so, be a test and learn kind of human, if that makes sense. Yeah. If you're a marketer, you got to be able to test and iterate. I always talk about Apple and Google being completely different types of businesses. Apple is very much measure twice, cut once. Mm-hmm. It's a smart way to live, and like that works for them. Google's very much test and iterate, figure it out. As a marketer, you got to be more like Google. I know we all like Apple, but you got to be more like Google if you're going to be good at marketing. So you have to be willing to learn from mistakes, and you have to be willing to act quickly. So if you see a mistake being made, don't overreact. First, assess it from the right angle, mm-hmm. and then come into it as a quick decision. If something isn't working, make sure you know what working means, and then make a change or a move. Mm-hmm. So survival of the fittest as a marketer is your ability to A/B split. Mm-hmm. So if you're not familiar with A/B splitting, go look it up. But you need to put your stuff against other stuff and find out which one works best. If you've ever done email marketing, you know about A/B splits. That's the most common place to do it. You take 2 different messages and see which one performs better on opens and clicks and driving traffic. But even that can be misleading. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like if you use the wrong measurement, it can be very misleading. So let's say you test 2 different subject lines in your email, and one gets a lot more open rates. You would assume that if it got better open rates, you should use that subject line. Mm-hmm. But what you're not thinking about is, did it lead to sales? Mm-hmm. So like you have to actually take a little bit of a zoom out on emails as well and say, it's not just about that conversion rate right there. It's about the ultimate conversion rate, which is, did it lead to sales? And if you're not measuring it from beginning to end all the way to sales, you're probably getting a little too granular. Mm-hmm. So, A/B splitting is the tool of the marketing gods. That's how you make it. I've been marketing. That's all I've done my whole life. 18 years old, I got in. I started my first business when I was 18 in affiliate marketing. I went to college for marketing and then dropped out and went full force in my business because I was making so much money. When you're making $10,000 a night, you're like, I don't need to go to college anymore. So I started making money because I understood this thing called leapfrogging. So look at what other people are doing that's working and try and find a way. It's not leapfrogging, it's benchmarking. Try and find a way to see who's doing it best and then just take over. And it's, if you can copy what they do and do a little bit better, you can literally take the market from them. Mm-hmm. So instead of getting caught up into, how can I get an influencer to be perfect, that one influencer, instead think of it as, what are the biggest companies doing with influencers? That's like, what is Apple doing with influencers right now? They're definitely not paying influencers. I can guarantee you they're not. So why aren't they paying influencers? Well, because they earn their content. They earn those influencers. So how did they earn those influencers? They had cool products. Mm-hmm. And those influencers came running through that product. Well, you're a marketer, so you don't have control over the product being built. So you say, well, Zach, that's not going to work for me. So then you go another step and you say, well, why were those products cool? Mm-hmm. Well, they looked cool. Well, you never tried it before and you still went out and bought it. So what made you want to go try it? You go, well, I saw the line at the store and I read a review that says this is the best phone of all time. It's like, eventually if you keep working back, you always find it does come down to marketing. And the marketing is social proof. If you can get enough people saying that something's awesome, you don't even need to work very hard. So put all your time and thought into engaging the fans and working with influencers that have engaged fans, and just let the magic happen. Stop trying to control everything.
Talk to me a little bit about the targeting trap. What is that?
Essentially, it's kind of like the law of attraction, but I'm not big on that, that woo-woo stuff. But like, it's about attracting rather than chasing everything. So over targeting leads to overconfidence. This is another takeaway from Roy H. Williams, Wizard of Ads. He really got into my head about this. It's like, you don't want to get into the fallacy of thinking you have your perfect customer figured out, because women influence decisions in the household more than men. Everybody knows that. But for some reason, we think for men product, we should only target the men. It's like, no. I remember years ago, I had this perfume company. I won't mention the name, but they wanted to do a targeted ad around Valentine's Day. It wasn't perfume, cologne, a cologne company. And they wanted to do this targeted ad around Valentine's Day. And their ads were so bad. Oh my God, they were so bad. And so like, they were like these men with their shirts off. And I'm like, who are you trying to reach? I'm like, there's an audience for this, but who do you want to buy the cologne? And they're like, well, we want the men to go and buy the cologne. I'm like, who's the one that they're trying to impress? It's actually not. It's kind of weird to think of this, but men wear cologne that they hope smells good to a woman. Men are the girly ones. We like the flowery stuff. Like, women wear what we like, right? That's weird, isn't it? I don't wear what I like. I wear what I think attracts. So it's almost like you need to think on the other side, because most everything is about attraction. Mm-hmm. And so, if you want to market cologne well, make sure women are a part of that. Make sure they belong in that. Even though they don't wear it, they are a huge, if not the most important part of that buying decision. If a man is likes a girl and a girl likes this cologne, that cologne is the one he's going to buy. Mm-hmm. If a man likes the smell, the first thought is, I wonder if girls would like this smell. Because they're not wearing it for themselves. At least most of the time. Some of those guys at the club might be wearing it for themselves. They wear like way too much. But you know what I mean.
Sweet. Well, Zach, is there anything that you want to leave, your listeners with about, the lies that they've been told about micro influencer marketing? Anything that we didn't hit on?
Influencer marketing isn't for everybody. It's not the silver bullet. And I talk about it like it's this big thing, but it's not the only thing. There are so many other ways to market a company and do business. If your product isn't a fit for it, don't feel bad. Don't get down on yourself. Some of this stuff isn't for everybody, but there are ways that you can find ways to make things cool. So if you have a product that's maybe it's uninteresting, like, and nobody thinks their product's interesting, but let's say it's like a real personal hygiene product, like very personal. You might think it's cool, but nobody thinks it's cool. I have seen companies find ways to make fun and laughter the focus, and it can work really well. So here, and I'll end with this story. I had a brand that did, they had these like room sprays that didn't have the plastics in them, no phthalates. And so they were really like, you could spray your room and you'd have to worry about breathing it in. And if you've ever looked at the back of one of those like Febreze things, it says right on it, do not inhale. It's like, it's really bad for you. And I didn't know that until I tried this product. But anyways, they also had a poopery type product where you spray it in the toilet. And I remember talking to this brand and saying, we'll do the room spray, but we're not doing the toilet product. And they go, well, why? And I go, because no one wants to talk about poop. And I'm like, that's not cool. You don't put that on social media. And well, I wasn't thinking straight at the time because, well, the brand didn't listen to me. So they dropped the poopery product in the box anyways, didn't listen to me even after I told them not to do it. And a couple days after the product started getting into the influencers' hands, we started seeing posts about the Poopery product, and I was furious. Somebody came to my office. He said, they did it anyways. And I was like, they're fired. You know, I was like ready to just quit it. I'm like, they're not, you know, they pay me, but I'm going to fire them. So I was like, they're fired. I went in and I pulled up one of the videos. First video, I was on the floor. It was so funny. Like this guy, he made this explosion. I don't want to get into all the detail, but like it was about exploding in toilets, and you'll get the idea. But it was hilarious. And I remember my team cracking up, and I'm like, you know what? This is proof that even I don't understand the creativity and the authenticity of these influencers. Try not to just put your own box around these people. They're the artists. Let them be artists. Mm-hmm. And so even though I might say it might not work for you, try it anyways. Mm-hmm. Test and learn. Don't listen to people like me telling you exactly how to get it done. Figure it out by testing and keep playing around, and you'll get it right.
That's great. Great thing to leave the listeners with.